At this point, it's hardly a secret that Hades is a gem, easily being my game of the year, with critical and public reviews being phenomenal, and rightly so. It's a game oozing with style, character, and just plain fun. With all the praise it's been receiving though, I wanted to look at what else Supergiant Games have created. They've made some amazing titles over the years. Before Hades, there was Pyre, a fantasy RPG where you guide a wide cast of characters from their exile by playing a ritualized game of basketball. It's weird, it's cool looking, it's fun. Before that is Transistor, a cyberpunk action RPG where you pause the game to queue up moves and then see them all unleashed speedy quick. It's the same sort of style, great soundtrack, and fun gameplay that is so characteristic of Supergiant Games. Their first game, my personal favorite, and the one I'm going to focus on today, is Bastion. I'm going to go over the game, why I like it so much, and a little narrative analysis at the end. So without further ado, here's why I like Bastion. Bastion is an isometric action RPG released in 2011, developed by Supergiant Games, first debuting on the Xbox 360 and the Xbox Summer of Arcade event. In it, you play as the Kid, a white-haired young lad who wakes up to the world being completely destroyed by the Calamity. You battle across the gorgeous ruins of Caelondia to grab crystal cores, using them in conjunction with the game's namesake, the Bastion, to rebuild civilization. Admittedly, it's not the most compelling premise, but the game has one major gimmick that elevates the story significantly.
Proper story's supposed to start at the beginning. Ain't so simple with this one. Now here's a kid whose whole world got all twisted, leaving him stranded on a rock in the sky. He gets up, sets off for the Bastion, where everyone agreed to go in case of trouble. Ground forms up under his feet as it point the way. He don't stop to wonder why.
The entirety of Bastion is narrated by this charming fellow.
Sure enough, he finds another. He finds me. We talk for a spell.
Everywhere you go and everything you do, you're going to hear this rugged, deep voice. It seems like that might get old after a while, and for some, that might be the case. But for me, it just never does, even having replayed this game like 6 or 7 times. It's carried by some great writing and superb voice acting by Logan Cunningham. He also voices Hades himself, as well as some of the other big characters in Supergiant Games' games. Supergiant Games' games? Games by Supergiant Games. This disembodied voice guides you through the world of Bastion, giving you snippets of lore and commenting on things that happen to you. For example, I can beat this first enemy without getting hit, because I'm just that good at video games. And this is what he has to say.
Kid pops him good. Starts to feel his bruises, though.
Now, if I start the game again and allow the guy to give me a few hits, he'll have this to say.
Kid pops him good. Fella got a piece of him, though.
This is just one example of how things can differ. Fall off the edge, he'll say something. Break a lot of boxes, he'll say something.
Kid just rages for a while.
Fall off a lot, he'll comment on that.
Know how many times kid nearly fell off the barge back there? 4 times.
Go through an area without taking damage, he'll mention it.
Not a scratch on him as he presses on the higher ground.
While it may just be a voice line playing after a specific trigger, it's still immensely charming, and each line just sounds so cool, I want to hear them all. Very colloquial and informal way he gives you the rundown on everything is just so damn interesting, and a pretty creative way to tell a story. Even if it seems obvious, to have like a narrator tell you a story. It just hasn't been done, I guess, to my knowledge, maybe. Don't quote me on that. The narration is definitely a major part of why I love this game, but Bastion's other assets are not lacking either. The art style is beautiful and vibrant, and just so full of color and character. Areas have a distinctive feel to them, while all still making sense in a greater context as a coherent world. These are the fragments of the once city Caelondia and its surroundings, and it makes sense. You get some really neat cityscapes, some lush wilderness areas, and some icy bits too. If this is the end of the world, it makes you wonder what things were like in their heyday. Character models are pretty simple little 3D doodads. The game's 3 major areas all have unique enemies and different variants of those enemies. These variants are only recolored or a different size, which is a little disappointing, but all have different attacks to shake up the gameplay. They're all pretty fun to fight, except for the bird.
Oh, well, everybody's heard about the bird. Bird, bird, bird. Bird's a word, oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. Bird is a word, oh, well, a bird, bird, bird. Well, a bird is a word, oh, well, a bird, bird, bird.
On the audio side, Darren Korb nails Bastion's soundtrack. It's this acoustic fantasy mix that just meshes perfectly together. Things like the title and hub world track call you to adventure. There's action-filled songs for combat. Some darker, spookier stuff. And some singing featuring Ashley Barrett and Darren Korb himself.
Someday your bird is gonna fly.
The tracks are catchy, distinctive, and perfectly complement the rest of the game. Some songs are reused between levels, but they're just so good that I can't really complain. Overall, it's a phenomenal soundtrack. How about the actual game itself, though? It's pretty simple, but has a bit of depth to it. You can carry 2 weapons at a time with you, along with a shield for blocking and countering, a dodge roll, and a special ability. If it seems similar to Hades, that's because it is. The groundwork laid here was perfected in Hades, I would say. But Bastion is still competent and fun in its own right. Weapons are unlocked at a pretty rapid pace, almost every level. The variety is pretty good too. None of them feel outright better than another. They all have different roles, and it's up to the player to use what they like or what the situation calls for. Not to mention that the narrator will comment on your choice of weapons as well.
A repeater goes with a hammer better than a box of nails.
Which is pretty cool, but maybe that's just me. Your special abilities can also be dependent on what weapons you're using, making for a lot of different combinations to try out. There's almost too many. So you fight past the haywire security systems and creatures still inhabiting these ruins, and try not to fall off, all in the search of finding a core. With it, you can hop back to the Bastion and build different buildings. With them, you can have different passive effects through potions, buy items, or upgrade your weapons. Find the upgrade materials specific to each weapon scattered throughout the levels, and then choose how you want to improve that weapon. They're not totally binding either. You can change the upgrade for free and mix and match between the 2 paths. There's also a building that gives you challenges for you to complete. Whether it's doing a specific thing with a weapon, like piercing 3 targets with a bow, or discovering a certain amount of items, they give you extra incentive to experiment and explore. There's also the option to invoke the gods if you feel the game is too easy. They offer specific debuffs, like making enemies attack faster, or have more health, or do more damage, or drop a bomb on death. It can get challenging pretty quickly with multiple of these on. You get extra experience for each god you have on though, so there's that. It just makes the bird even worse though, so do so at your own peril. Besides the regular levels that you go through, there's weapon challenge levels to complete that will reward you with more goodies. It might be kill the enemies as quickly as possible with the machete, or break the targets in as few shots as you can with the bow. There's a lot to do here for such a little game, especially if you enjoy the core gameplay, or if you just want to hear the narrator say more things, which I do too.
You know what's better than having a slinger pistol in a fight? Having 2.
Okay, now more on the story. Despite the jokes and overall fun appearance of the game, there's some rather dark moments. The narrator lists off people in a very intimate way who died in the calamity.
The Thunder Brothers didn't make it. Nordy the bird boy didn't make it. Kid does what he has to do.
There's reflections where you learn about the kid's mom dying while he was a guard on the walls. So afterwards he goes back to the walls for a second tour.
Once the kid done his time, he hurried on home. Turns out his mama's time was done too.
There's a dream sequence that plays off of past areas and voice lines, and it works.
The proper story's supposed to start at the beginning. It's so simple with this one. Now here's a kid whose whole world's alright, snoozing there on a rock in the sky. He wakes up, I'm just fooling.
It doesn't feel too edgy or out of place. It fits right in. The consequences of such an apocalyptic event are pretty well expressed here. As you collect these cores and gradually restore the Bastion, you come across a few other survivors. There's Zulf, who's kinda just looking like this when you meet him. And then there's Zia, whose introduction is with the song accompaniment, which is one of the more memorable moments of the game. Both Zulf and Zia are Ura, a people from east of the city. The Ceylandians and the Ura went to war way back when, but things are pretty okay now. For the most part. Alright, story spoilers. If you want to play this for yourself, which I wholly recommend if any of this video has sounded interesting, it's currently on sale on Steam for like $2, and there's a demo to try too if you're really skeptical. If you're worried about spoilers, skip here. Alright, spoiler time. When you meet Zia, you find her father's journal written in the Ura language which only Zulf can read. He reads it and gets really mad. Turns out that the Calamity, the earth-shattering event that caused all this, was a weapon made by the city of Ceylandia to wipe out the Ura once and for all. Zia's father, an Ura himself who lived in the city, was working on the project and made it backfire. Zulf is understandably upset about the Doomsday device and tries to destroy the Bastion before running off. You have to find even more crystals to fix things and fight Ura, who also survived and are similarly pissed off like Zulf. You do it all, and in the final level, Rux, the narrator, goes into greater detail on the Bastion, which he helped make. Turns out, it doesn't quite restore things just as much as it switched things to the past.
Everything you've ever done, you could do it over. And wouldn't that be grand? Wouldn't you agree? So you're probably wondering if the Calamity happened already. What's to stop it from happening again after the Bastion does its thing? The answer is... I don't know.
So there's this problem, as he says. There's nothing from stopping this from happening again. Alternatively, the Bastion can just take what survivors remain and move on, making a new life. You later find Zulf, who the Ura have abandoned for leading you, the ultimate Ura ass-kicking machine, right to them. You're given the option of leaving him to continue on your beatdown of an entire culture, or saving him. If you do that, you're defenseless. The Ura shoot you as you carry Zulf's unconscious body to the exit. But this happens.
I'm coming home, sweet home.
They let you go. You can get back to the Bastion and make your choice on whether to go back to the past before the Calamity or move on with your new life. The game offers no judgment either way, but here's where I want to get into my reading of this story. I think that fundamentally, Bastion is about nostalgia, trauma, and dealing with the past. Which is kind of funny considering that I love thinking back on when I first played this game, but whatever. The entire game, the narrator is telling you about how things were before. You collect fragments of the old world and are dedicating to restoring a past that the player really doesn't know all that much about. Zulf learns about the evil origins of the Calamity, but is unable to accept that the people around him are actively trying to heal things, and don't want the destruction of the Ura. We get so focused on the past and what was, we forget to look at the here and now. Forgive me if that sounds like something you'd see on your middle school English teacher's wall, but I feel like the game is reckoning with the past and moving on. The Calamity sucked to be sure, but it's also the beginning that allowed all these characters to meet. It allows for the kid to escape a life of service on the walls and for this whole adventure to begin. It might not be a super in-depth reading, but I feel like if a video game is a medium by which we can navigate the past, trauma, and ultimately moving on, then that's a valuable experience, even if it is super simple. I could talk about this so much more, and one allegory that I particularly like is the game as a breakup, as Errant Signal suggests. So check out that video if you want to hear more. It's pretty interesting, but I don't want to just echo his thoughts here. So that's why I like Bastion, and my 2 cents on it. One of my favorite games ever. It's fun, unique, immensely charming, and just a good time overall. Seriously recommend checking it out, or any game made by Supergiant for that matter. All of their games are masterfully done with amazing soundtracks, visuals, writing, and fun gameplay. If you enjoy Hades or any of these look interesting, they're seriously worth it, and on sale right now. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching, and stay safe and happy holidays.
to the sky. Gonna build that wall up to the sky. Someday you're